So let's get started. A very warm welcome to all of you. We are very honored that you chose this session to be your first session of Tableau conference. Hope everybody got a chance to see the keynote this morning. Yeah? Any big takeaways? Data modeling, all right. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I haven't seen many of those demos myself, so I was like, yay, I can actually use that in my work too. All right, so we're going to, our talk today is going to talk about backgrounder. We have two things we want to accomplish with this talk today. One is we want to give you some tools. We'll talk about some features that are coming this year or have already shipped that you can make use of. Our goal is that you can take one or two things with you today and start to use that on your server. The second goal we have is we will have a feedback section at the end. We want you to be able to influence and impact our roadmap. So we're going to share some of our thoughts on roadmap for the next 12 to 18 months. And what I'm hoping is this face-to-face opportunity with you to make sure that we understand the areas of improvement from your perspective and that you help shape our roadmap and our investments in the next year. Does that sound good? All right, awesome. So here's kind of what we're going to cover today. Tao, my co-presenter, is going to start off, and we're going to cover a little bit about what backgrounder is and some terminology we're going to use throughout the presentation just to level set. We'll then walk through some of the capabilities available on server today. We're going to talk about management in the server UI, as well as some REST APIs that were shipped this year or coming up soon. Then we're going to talk about visibility. We're going to share with you some of the workbooks we use internally to kind of make sense of how backgrounder is doing and how do we troubleshoot things. And finally, we'll talk about some of the governance things that you can do on Tableau Server. Tao is going to share some of the configuration settings that you can make on your Tableau Server to control your backgrounder better. And then we'll have some time for feedback at the end. My name is Aruna Balsubramanian. I'm a product manager on the schedules team, the team that works on backgrounder. My co-presenter is Tao.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our talk.
Tao is the engineering manager on the team, and she's our resident expert of how backgrounder works. So I'm super excited to actually do this presentation with her. She also has a very good understanding of Tableau Online and has brought some of those learnings onto on-prem server. On a personal front, Tao is doing a master's in communication, and she's also works as a business consultant for small businesses to solve problems using data. On personal front, I tend to be very low-key. I do non-exciting things like gardening and going on long retreats, but Tao is a go-getter on the team. So with that, I'm going to hand off to Tao to take the first session.
Thank you, Aruna. And observing daily how Aruna works and how much she talks, it's really hard for me to believe that she really goes on a silent retreat. For 10 days, she does not talk to anyone. I cannot imagine myself doing that. Okay. Before we go to do a quick overview of backgrounders, let me do a quick show of hand. Since you are in this talk, I assume you have more or less used backgrounders. Now, is there anyone in this room that hasn't scheduled any backgrounder job? Okay, expected. Now, how many among you are the heavy backgrounder users that you have job running on a daily basis? Wow. How many of you are the administrators and you manage the backgrounder resource for other users? Cool, nice. It's like half the room. How many of you are Tableau Online user? Oh, some. Cool. Okay, now hopefully we'll cover some content that is helpful for all of you today. Okay, let's have a quick overview of backgrounders. You probably have known that in Tableau Server, there is certain component user interact directly, such as with SQL Server. And the backgrounder is the component that a user does not interact directly. Let's take Chiso Japanese restaurant as an example. Chiso Japanese restaurant is a local favorite in Seattle Fremont area. almost all the employees in Tableau has been visited this restaurant because this is the place where Tableau headquarters located. There, you have your sushi bar and your back kitchen. Sushi bar is like your physical server, where you make order to sushi, and the sushi will be made to order instantly at the spot. But if you make an order to have some udon soup, then that order goes to the back kitchen, and the order will be prepared without you seeing it. Backgrounder is like the back kitchen for Tableau Server. There are certain terms we use in backgrounder system. First, when you create a extract refresh or email subscription, you actually created a backgrounder task. Backgrounder task is like the recipe which tells the system how to do the work. Each individual execution of that work, we call it a backgrounder job. You can have multiple jobs result from the same task, just like you can have multiple servings from the same recipe. There is a job queue managed by backgrounder. You have to get your job into the job queue in order to get your job executed. And there are two ways to get your job into the job queue. First is by schedules. If you create a task, you put that task onto a schedule. And when the time comes, the job will be self-triggered and go into the job queue. Or you can use our REST API or command line. You can integrate our REST API and command lines into your automation and integrate it into your external workflows. How many of you are using automations to trigger your jobs? Nice. And where do you see those terms in the Tableau server? As their name suggested, the schedules and the tasks are listed under the top menu pages. Today, the job information is only visible to administrators in the admin views. We are working on provide more visibilities into individual jobs and job histories. Aruna has more in her section. Hold on your thoughts to that. And at a high level, this is how backgrounder works. Inside the backgrounder process, there is a scheduler component. It manages the information inside the schedules and the tasks table inside the Postgres database. That is your metadata. On the other hand, the scheduler is listening to the customer input from this portal via web UI or REST APIs or command lines. When a job is triggered by command line or schedule, it goes to our job queue, which is another table inside the Postgres database called backgrounder jobs. And the job runner component inside the backgrounder process will pick that job up and run. The execution information will be surfaced to the admin view. So the schedules, the tasks, and the jobs are the most important entities we manage in this system. Today, there are more than 40 types of job running on backgrounder, and that number is increasing every release, as you just heard in the keynote. The latest resident in our platform is the data prep flows, or the conductor. Among these 40 types of tasks, there are 4 types that are user load, initiated by users. They are your extract refreshes, the email subscriptions, the data-driven alerts, and the latest prep flows. The rest of the types are all system work. The system work are like the vitamins to Tableau Server. We need, but only need a little bit of each type. So in practice, the user workload consumes your majority of the backgrounder resource. And that will be our focus today. Within the whole Tableau architecture, here is your backgrounder, which is at the back end of the services layer. Now, let me hand over to Aruna to talk about how you can manage in this system and what are the information visible to you.
Thank you, Tao. What we're going to cover in the next section is really how do you manage your jobs using Server UI as well as REST APIs. And I'm going to talk about some features that are either in the product this year or are coming up soon that you can make use of. So we're going to start off with schedules. Schedules, as you know, are visible to server and site admins today. And if you are a server admin, you can create your schedules, which your users can then use to schedule their tasks. In terms of actual actions that you can take, you can disable your schedules, you can run them, you can change the priority, you can change the, you can rename, you can delete, all those things that are possible. And for users, they don't have the visibility today, and I'll talk a little bit about custom schedules later on. When we come to tasks, there are 4 different kinds of tasks, as Tao mentioned, extract refreshes being one of them, and this is visible to users as well as server and site admins. And in terms of actions that you can take, you can run them now, you can change the priority, you can delete, and you can change the schedule. Now we've heard a number of our server administrators ask us that they don't always want all the users to be able to change the priorities. They would like to control that better. And Tao's section on governance is going to give you some settings that are available on server today that can give you that control that you want. In terms of flows, it's where you heard about flows this morning. It's very similar to how extract refreshes are. So it's visible to users, server and site administrators. And you'll see that in terms of actions, it's very similar to what you can do with extract refreshes. So you can think of it very similar to that kind of a task. For subscriptions, again, these are visible to server and site admins as well as users. And some of the actions you can take is to add yourself, to be able to unsubscribe, to be able to change your schedule, and then to be able to delete. Alerts are an interesting task type because you don't really schedule them. Your users don't really schedule them. What they do is they go onto a Wiz and they are tracking some kind of a metric that they want to set a threshold on, and then they just want to be notified if that number gets hit either above or below it. And so what really happens is that their job's running the backgrounder that actually are tracking that metric, and if the metric changes in the database, the alert is just sent off to the user. So it's not so much about users scheduling it, but still that job is run on the backgrounder and quite a bit, especially if you have a large number of alerts on your, if your users are using a large number of alerts. And again, in terms of actions that users or administrators can take, they can add themselves to an alert, they can edit it, they can delete it. Let's talk a little bit about jobs now. So on server, to be able to create a job, your users probably go to the content page, they go and click on a data source, and they go and click on extract refreshes. When they do that, they get an option to be able to create an incremental refresh or a full refresh, or they can schedule it. And so this is how jobs are really triggered in the background when they do this. In terms of visibility, we don't have visibility to users today. Most of the visibility is for server and site administrators, and this is using the admin views. And so we have 2 different admin views, one for extract refreshes and one for non-extract refreshes. We have a Tableau activity happening at TC today and tomorrow, today afternoon and tomorrow morning. We're going to share an early prototype on how we want to give this visibility of jobs on server UI to server administrators, users, and site admins. You can do things like canceling a job, you being able to prioritize, not prioritize per se the job itself, but you can kind of make sense of what jobs are pending, what jobs are running right now, what have succeeded, what have failed, all on server UI. So if that's something that appeals to you and you want to give us good feedback on usability, if it has all the data you need, all that stuff, please come and find us. You can sign up for the lab activity. We'll happily take your feedback. Let's talk about REST APIs. So for schedules themselves, especially for the on-premise server, we have full support. We have full API support. And so you'll see that you have ability to create, update, read, and delete. For Tableau Online, we have something that we call custom schedules. And so this is where users themselves have ability to be able to go and trigger their own custom schedules. The reason for this is that for Tableau Online, Tableau is the server administrator, and there's no way we can predict all the kinds of schedules that users would need. So we gave them the ability to be able to create those custom schedules when they schedule a particular task. And so we don't really have REST API support for it. But one thing I do want to mention is we did add the ability for you to go and turn on custom schedules if you want to on-premise Tableau Server using Tableau Services Manager command line. Now, we don't have a lot of governance in terms of visibilities. We are adding that as we go. So it's not on by default. But if that's something that you're looking for, you want to give your users more self-service capabilities, there is something that you can do. A caveat there, though, once you change to custom schedules, you can't go back. So we don't allow a hybrid model today where you can do both admin schedules and custom schedules. So with that caveat, if that's something that you want to do, it's available to you. Let's talk about tasks now. For extract refreshes, today we cannot really create and delete them. Creation happens either on the Tableau Server UI or using desktop. We did add ability to new REST APIs to be able to query your jobs and also job info for subscriptions specifically. We already had support for extract refreshes, but we added for subscriptions as well. And so there are two REST APIs that you can run for getting all job information across your server or even site-specific. So check that out. It shipped in 2018.2 release. We also added support for being able to, and also when we talk about update, you can also run job, and running jobs is a way that you can update your extract refreshes and things like that. In terms of alerts, we have pretty good support. Other than creation, which really happens on the Wiz itself, you can update, delete, as well as read. We have full API support. That support is actually coming in 2019.1. And also, we'll have additional APIs where you can add recipients to an alert. And the last is subscriptions, and we have full API support for subscriptions, and we've had it for a while now. When we talk about job management, I misspoke. This is where we added the REST API support for jobs themselves, so you can actually see all the jobs for a particular site or across your server. And so we added support for querying jobs as well as getting query job info. We also added a REST API to be able to cancel your jobs. This was something that was highly requested in the community. And so we were glad to add this as a REST API. And like I mentioned, the prototype that we have will show you how you can do that same thing in the server UI. And when a cancellation happens, we send off an email notification to the user who is actually the owner of the workbook or data source. So they get an email notification, so they know that the job has been canceled, and they may actually not see that email notification they're waiting for. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about visibility. So I'm going to cover a few of the custom admin views that we use internally to kind of make sense of your backgrounder. So we talked about management, which is great, but how do you get visibility on what's really happening? The first one is probably familiar to you. This is an out-of-box admin view that most admins see on Tableau Server. And what you're really seeing here is on the top, it gives you a status of jobs. I know it's an eye chart. We'll walk through it slowly. The one on the bottom left is actually telling you how much time extracts are taking on an average. And what you'll see there is there's a slight bump in the extract in this particular chart. And when we looked at it, our admins went and investigated and found the job that it was related to. And when you hover on it, what you see is that the job actually sat on the queue for a very long time. You'll see that the creation time was in the morning, and the job actually didn't run till afternoon. So this is a quick snapshot. It tells you what's wrong. Now you have to dig into data to really see what's going on. And so it's helpful to some extent, but not a whole lot. And what you'll see at the bottom is just how many successes and failures are happening over time. Again, this doesn't show failures. Definitely failures happen at Tableau also. What this is helpful for is just to see whether it's stable over a period of time. And if you're seeing more failures, then you may want to dig into data. The next one is what is used at Tableau on a daily basis. And this is a custom admin view that our Alpo administrators use. It again is showing you the extract, refresh history over a period of time. I'm going to draw your attention to two things on this viz. The first one is the one in the middle, especially towards the end, where you see that there were a number of jobs that failed, and you can see that they failed over a period of time. If you go and hover on this, there's a notice field in the database where we store information on why the failure happened. And in looking at that, it turns out that our SQL server was down. It was actually having ETL loads, and so it was taken offline for a bit, and that's why that happened. And so this is a good viz that you can use to kind of understand what's happening. The other interesting thing on this viz is see how there's actually a user who is running hourly refreshes as well as incremental refreshes, and their incremental refresh was actually overlapping with their hourly refresh, and it kind of failed. And then the admin noticed that, and they slightly changed the schedule on their incremental refresh, and you'll see that after the fact, it actually started to succeed. Again, this is a good visualization that you can use to kind of make sense of what's happening on your server at any given point of time. This is based on the Postgres database, and we have a link towards the end where you can actually go to the community and download these vizes and use them for your own purposes if you want to. The next one I want to talk about gives you a view of what is the CPU usage per process. So the process on the top is the interactive processes like WhiskQL. So the one in the green is really the WhiskQL server. And so it gives you a sense for how is your WhiskQL server doing over a period of time. And the bottom, what you see is backgrounder. And if you see that backgrounder is hitting CPU threshold all the time, then possibly you might want to consider adding a new node, more backgrounder processes, so that you can handle that node. And the last one I'll share with you is one we use for Tableau Online. The interesting thing about this viz is actually looking at extract refreshes in different dimensions. It's looking at overall load of extract refreshes across the whole server. It's also taking a look at time. So it's taking a look at what's the runtime, what's the queue time. And then it's also giving you a view of what's happening across different sites. So what's the total number of extracts that are running for a particular site? So it just gives an overall good view of what's happening across your Tableau server. Again, as I mentioned, we'll have links towards the end if you want to use this dashboard for your purposes. The next set of the visibility dashboards are really related to online. So I'm going to invite Tao back since she uses them on a daily basis.
Thank you, Aruna. Yes, so I am enthusiastic about the scale, and I'm happy to take in Tableau to the cloud, to the scale. So that's my passion. And yes, this is the chart I look at every day. And good that we don't have any online customers here, so none of you have experienced this incident. And this is a real incident that happened in online. So backgrounder is a Java application. So it generates the JMX counters or Java management extension counters. If you know what a JMX counter is and you have the resource to set up monitoring for it, you are welcome to do so. If you don't know what it is, that is totally fine. We are working to build those visibilities and surface those important informations through the product itself. So just hand tight, and we will present that to you. So what happened was there was one day our queue time alert fired. So we set up monitoring on all kinds of counters. Particularly, we have a queue time counter. When a job is triggered and gets into the job queue, we want to make sure that the job is executed timely. And on that day, when the alert fired, you can see that the jobs were sitting in the queue for more than 2 hours. That's unacceptable. So the team jumped on to investigate. We firstly suspected, oh, is our job runner down and we could not execute any jobs? Then we went on to check our throughput, which is represented in the execution in progress counter. The line here tells you how many backgrounder processes currently have a job running. As you can see, before the incident, there is idle time, there is job running, and there is idle times in between. Those are the healthy churns in the system that you have job comes and go, and the system can rest up and pick up new job. When the incident is happening, all the job runners are running in full speed, and there is no idle time in between. So the same amount of capacity could not catch up on the same number of jobs. That lead us to think maybe our jobs become more expensive to run. We then turned to our job runtime counter and confirmed our guess. As you can see, there is an obvious jump in the job execution time or job runtime, and the job runtime plateaued out at the timeout limit. All these thoughts happened within seconds because we have these 3 graphs laid out side by side. A good dashboard can really make a difference for your problem diagnosis. In fact, we are not only want to give you the visibilities and help you with the problem diagnosis. We would like to help you prevent the problem from happening by offering you the governance tools. Backgrounder is a batch execution system running at the back. Our overarching goal is to make the system reliable and efficient. And our ideal situation is that you do not need to care about this system, and it will just run fine for you. But does that happen to you right now? Maybe not yet. Our steps we're taking is first, give you those mechanical knobs you can tune by yourself, which is the management tools. Then we give you the nice LED screens so that you can, those terminals, so that you can see what's happening in the system. And next step is for us to build more autopilot-ish things for you to set the rules, set the policies, and let the machine just run. Imagine you have a busy kitchen, and orders are just keep coming in and get queued up. What can you do to help this situation? First, you want to control what work gets in and in what order. During the execution, you want to consider how you would like to allocate resources among all these different needs. Then, you want to consider when should the work leave your system and give the way to the other new work. And finally, you want to control your retry behavior. Tableau offers tools to help on all these fronts today or in the near future. Most of those tools are controlled by server configurations. I will have a cheat sheet at the end of the section, talk about all these configuration settings for your easy reference. Now, let's talk about them one by one. Priority. Each backgrounder job has a priority. Job with higher priority or lower priority number runs earlier. priority is not the most straightforward concept today in the system. So let me try to explain how it works. If your extract refresh job is triggered out of a task, the priority of your job comes with the task setting. And that task setting can be controlled by any task owners. If you, as the administrator, would like to ensure better fairness across users, you can configure the server to ignore the task priority. In that way, all the extract refresh jobs will fall back to use your schedule's priority. Yes, schedule has a priority too. And the schedule is controlled by administrator, by you. Then in this way, you can make sure no one is jump ahead of the queue secretly. Also, you have seen that from the VizPortal UI, you can trigger a job to run now. By default, Tableau gives higher priorities to such run now jobs. By definition, we thought you want to finish that right away. However, we do not limit who can run now yet. So we are building that capability. We are getting feedbacks. But in the meantime, if you do not want the run now jobs to jump ahead of the queue, you can configure your server to do so too. For email subscriptions, those jobs are always using the schedule's priority. So hopefully that's easier to manage. But we do have a particular feedback question at the feedback section, gathering feedback about the priority, how we want to manage the priority. So definitely give your thoughts. When job runner pick up a job to run, there are more factors or more nuances it considers besides the priority, such as the in-queue time. In 19Q1, we're shipping a new feature called job rank, where a single rank number is calculated at the job creation time, which factor in all these nuances and factors we want to consider to rank a job. And since it is a single number, it is much more efficient to sort and reduce load on both of your background process as well as your Postgres database. The most important thing about this feature is that job rank now takes into consideration of your job's historical runtime, so that a job usually runs faster will run earlier. In this way, the system rewards efficiency and reduce the aggregated queue time. When your job is being executed, you can consider how you control the concurrency. There is a concept called serial schedules. You probably have worked with it. By default, all schedules are parallel schedules, and all jobs are running in parallel with all the resources available. If you create a serialized schedule, and the work on that serialized schedule will run only one by one. In this way, you limit how much resource from your system to those works. A test work can be one of the examples you might want to apply some techniques like this. The latest add-on we built on top of this is that you can define the serialized scope for those schedules. Previously, the serialized scope is the entire server, so that all the jobs from the entire server on this schedule have to go one by one. You can now configure your server to limit the serialized schedule, the scope to be on-site scope. That means the jobs from the same sites need to go one by one. But jobs from different sites, even they are on the same serialized schedule, can go in parallel. We found out that this makes more sense to a multi-tenant environment. We learned this in our Tableau Online.
Question about that parallel. Will that parallel pass to the database as well, or it is with the Oracle database as well. So is it going to, this parallel is going to be passed to the database or not?
It will not pass through. So the question is, will the parallel concept pass into your source database? The answer is not. In fact, if you have, the feature was built because Tableau wanted to have a way to respect your source database's parallelism. If you have a database, you can only accept 6 parallel calls, then there is no meaning or even harmful for you to accept more works to the same database with more than 6 parallelism.
This is just reducing the Tableau execution time, not the database execution time.
Correct. This is limit how many jobs in parallel you can run. And there is a more deeper database settings you can set to a data source to limit the concurrency to your database. So check those out. Yeah. We're also building capabilities for you to dedicate your hosts or nodes to run only certain types of jobs. This is more for the larger scale installations where your nodes are highly specialized, such as we do this in Tableau Online. In 19.1, we are shipping a Tableau Services Manager command line for you to set certain background hosts to run only prep flows or prep flow conductor. In this way, your flows will run on guaranteed and isolated resources. And we're also considering extend these capabilities to other resource-intensive workload, such as extract refreshes.
Does that mean that you can have dedicated background processes for the prep?
Yes, yes.
So you can say, I want background run 1 to always run those.
Yes. So it will allow you to say in this server installation, I want all the background processes on this node to run only flow job.
Yeah. So I want to clarify that it's per node,
It's
it's
node.
not per process.
Okay, so it's a separate machine then. Isolated.
Right,
That is correct.
One
Right.
that runs all extracts. Okay,
right.
thank you.
So let me pause there and ask, if we extended this capability to have extract refreshes run on dedicated nodes or subscriptions, would that be something that would be important for you? Yes?
More so, everybody said yes.
More on subscriptions? I'm sorry?
Everybody said yes.
Okay. All right, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the feedback.
Yeah, like it would be useful to have, to be able to set one of the backgrounders to a particular scheduled task, so we could give higher priority to some customers and
Yes.
let everybody else be in the general pool.
Absolutely. So that was going to be one of my questions in the feedback session. So it's good to hear that from you, that it's important for you.
Yeah, definitely that's some functionality suite we're considering for our autopilot offerings. There was a question on the back.
Yeah, should we also be able to run schedules on a separate node? So let's say the high priority schedules with very important extract refreshes on a separate node, or just flows, extract refreshes, and subscriptions on different nodes.
So schedules is applicable to all task types. So when you dedicate a worker node to just run flows or just run extract refreshes, it's basically saying that all the schedules related to those particular tasks are going to run anyways.
Yep. So when we're considering the dedication or capacity management or capacity allocation, we're considering multiple dimensions. Job type is one of the dimensions we're considering. And we're also considering other things such as priorities or job characteristics. And we will have a dedicated question in our feedback session to gather some feedbacks, definitely. Thanks for all these questions. And now, after the job is executed, you want to force work out of your system and give the way to the newer work. You have probably known there is a timeout associated with backgrounder jobs. How it works today is that in the server configuration, you can configure a backgrounder job timeout value. And you can also configure the job types that should be subject to this timeout value. You can manipulate both right now. The newer things we have built is that first, we allows you now to have timeout overrides per site in case you have you want to give longer or shorter timeout to certain sites. The second is that we want to allow you to specify different timeout value for different job types, because intuitively, you might want to have a shorter timeout for your alerts job than your extract and refresh jobs. That's coming soon. Probably not. Timeout is at the individual job level. Now, at the task level, we offer the failure suspension functionalities. If you turn this feature on, Tableau automatically monitors how many times this task has been failing. When it reaches the threshold you configured, it will automatically suspend this task from running. In this way, you prevent any waste of your resource on those unhealthy tasks. The nice thing about this feature is that Tableau also monitors any fixes or updates to the underlying content and automatically restart a suspended task if it detects a fix. And run now will still work even on a suspended task. This is available for extract refreshes today, and it will be available for all the user workload soon, including the prep flow conductor. And finally, you can define your retry behavior. By default, Tableau will retry once on crashed email subscription and extract refresh jobs. Both are in the server configuration. You can tune them. After all, this is your trade-off between your resource and the reliability. And this is the cheat sheet with all the server configurations I have talked about. These are all accessible by the Tableau Services Manager command line. With that, I will transfer to Aruna to summarize and lead us to the feedback section.
Are there any other questions before we move to the feedback section? Yes?
Are you going to have capabilities to cancel jobs from the background page, back on the extract refresh page? So right now, you can see
Yep.
hover over the
Right. Right, so in the server UI, we're actually thinking we'll have a separate menu page called jobs, where you can cancel different types of jobs. So you can, for example, cancel extract refresh, or maybe flow, you want to cancel a flow, maybe you want to cancel extract refresh. So we're thinking we want to give you visibility and give you actions, such as being able to cancel jobs from that UI. And that's the lab activity I was talking to you about, where we want to actually ship that sometime next year. But we want to make sure that it's going to work for your use cases, that we are designing it in a way that is helpful to you. So that's the feedback we are looking for at TC. A particular job. A job. Yep.
Job that is in pending or running state.
Okay. There's a question there?
What about the emails you send people when the extracts air out? Are you thinking about changing the messages that you provide to them about just what happened?
Yeah, absolutely. So today it's a very generic message, and it's not very helpful. Absolutely. So we have definitely that in a backlog. It's a little more complicated than just changing the message. It has to go all the way down to the stack and come back up. And that's the complexity we are seeing there. So we definitely hear it's a pain point today, and we are hoping to address it soon.
Quick question on the email topic as well. Like, we noticed that there's the backgrounder goes down for any reason.
I think this is definitely on the service managers backlog. Like they are looking at this. They are the Tableau Services Manager, or the TSM is the new orchestration or management tool in the entire Tableau server. There they added a bunch of new capabilities, and I will definitely check on if they have this on their roadmap.
Yeah, it's very limited today, like what you can do with
Yeah.
it. But I appreciate if we have something in the UI that we can do much more than actually doing on the command.
Yeah.
Server monitor already, like Gene was saying? A server monitor already, like an external third party monitor?
So there's one question in the back, and I'll come to you guys. All right. Go ahead. No? Okay, sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. So, yeah, I've got a schedule and a lot of workbooks, and some of the extracts are failing. So that attempts remaining, that will work with those workbook extracts to retry the extract.
So those retries are for the crashed jobs, meaning they are not deterministically failed, and you cannot troubleshoot them. They just silently crashed. We don't know why. For those ones, we will retry, and that's where the retry attempt applies. Today, if a job failed, deadly failed, then we don't retry them. If you have a need to retry such jobs, then definitely let us know, because so far we haven't got other feedbacks like this.
Well, it's just that our users don't necessarily know that the workbooks don't have current data, or they may not see any data at all, right? So we want to be able to have an elegant solution to
Yeah.
either, go back to the previous day's data, or
Okay.
is there something that can do that?
Not today, but that's good to know that there's a use case there that you have a problem today that we don't have a solution for.
Yeah, we can talk about this.
Yeah, we'll take two more questions, and we'll go to feedback, and then we can always have more questions at the end. Is that okay? So go ahead.
Is there an easy way to reset the threshold? I mean, currently, you have it up there at 5, but if you had a particular driver or something that was missing and it caused failures over and over, but then you want to set everything back to refresh. I mean, so maybe they'll get messages again, but you're in a better shape, hopefully.
Right. So the two things that Tao mentioned, one is that if you want, you can go right away once it's fixed. You can go and run now. You can actually run the jobs immediately.
Right.
But the second thing is when it gets fixed, Tableau auto detects that this has been fixed, and it does a retry automatically. The next time the schedule comes up.
Yeah, but what if you want to do it server-wide, the whole?
All the extracts, everything.
No, I mean just all the failures.
Uh-huh.
So it doesn't catch anything past today on. Just kind of resets that counter. Can you do that?
There is no easy way to do that today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we talked about this first with the custom schedules. Can you talk a little bit more about the permissioning around that? Like, if someone like us that has this many lines of business, there are some sites that we trust more than others that have better site admins that we're okay with them. Priority is a big thing. Everybody thinks they're number one and they want to jump in a priority. There are some people that we trust with that power and some that we don't. Can you talk a little bit more about the custom permissioning?
Sure. The custom schedules permissions today is site-wide. We don't have granularity on this set of users or this set of projects is the one that's going to be able to run custom schedules. But if you want to enable it for a particular site, you can definitely do that. So that's the easy answer there. Yeah. But it's limited, and that's the resource governance that we are trying to work on to make sure that we add more controls there before we make it so that customers can enable it by default. All right, I'm going to jump to the feedback section, and then if there are more questions, we'll hang around and come and find us. Okay. So the takeaways I want you to have from this section, one is that the settings are available to you. Please use them. Give us feedback if they're not working for you. And I appreciate the feedback, some of the things that you guys asked, saying that, hey, can we get more granularity there? We'll definitely take that feedback, we'll put it on our backlog, and hopefully we can get to that soon. We do have a job management activity. I've mentioned a few times. I'm not going to take more of your time there. Please come and find us. Give us feedback. We'd love to understand if we can make visibility as well as actions in the server UI so you can actually view and cancel jobs and make sense of your data. And the last one I'd really talk is that we have the workbooks that we showed is going to be in the community. It's posted in the community already, so you can make use of it. But with every release, we update them. So if there's something that you're looking for that is new, that you want newer ones, look out when we actually ship a new version. So let's jump into feedback. I have 3 areas of investment that I want to talk about today. The first one is governance policy. So this is very much in line of what Tao was talking about, some of the questions that came up where you can now control a threshold where if you have tasks that are failing over consecutive runs, then you can actually suspend them. The 2 other use cases we are kind of thinking here, one is, wouldn't it be great if you had ability for Tableau to detect if someone is actually running extract refreshes more frequently than it needed to. For example, an extract refresh takes 20 minutes, but they're really running it every hour, and maybe you don't really need it that frequently to be run. And so there are 2 things we can do. One is Tableau can notify the administrator this is happening, but they can also kind of exponentially back off and do that automatically. So I just want to see if this is something that is a pain point for you, and you see that it's going to be one of the use cases you want. Okay, great. Okay, good. The second one we are thinking about is workbooks and data sources that are not being viewed. So there's sometimes, they're popular, and after a period of time, no one's really looking at them, and they still have extracts running, for example, right? And again, Tableau being able to detect that, hey, there's some workbooks and data sources that are no longer being viewed, and again, backing off the frequency and letting the admin know that, hey, this is what's happening. Is that something that you would think is high priority? Okay. So I'm hearing number 2 got more votes than number 1. Is that true? No? They're equal? You want both? Okay. So those are the 2 big things we're thinking. If there are additional ones that you really care about, I'd love to hear that from you. So give that feedback to us. Come and talk to us. Or if you have a quick one, if you have some time, I'd love for you to tell us other use cases for policies that we should be thinking about.
Is there any way to flag a particular user as really important? Like, let's say you have a lot of users looking at it to begin with,
Yep.
because they report to the CFO, but eventually he's the only one that looks at it. So that's just one guy.
Great segue into my next one, which is priorities on schedules and permissions on schedules and priorities. So what you're asking for is one of the ways we could do that. We don't have that today, but one of the ways we can do that is to put permissions on who can run a particular schedule or whose job should be higher priority. And so that's one of the use cases we're thinking about. So let me ask you this, because there are many different ways we can skin that, right? So one is, would you prefer that we have permissions for certain projects, one, or certain groups of users, like a CFO, or would you want permissions on a site, for example? So which of these would be higher priority for you? How do you think about the use case? Group? Sites, groups? Anything else that I didn't mention? A project? Okay. Everything, okay. All right. So that's one thing that we're thinking about. The second one is, actually you already mentioned it. So sites is the other example, right? So you may have multiple different organizations that are on different sites, and maybe you want to prioritize them. For example, one of the use cases we heard was HR usually has some end of quarter reports that they want to publish, and maybe that's where the load is going to be maximum, and you want to prioritize that higher than all other sites, for example. Okay, so those are the 2 use cases we're thinking, putting permissions on groups or projects, and then second one is on sites. And the last one I'll talk about is capacity management. So this goes back to something we talked about, which is being able to dedicate background and nodes for a particular task type. Now this is little limiting, because if you don't have so let's say your extract refreshes run in the morning, but the rest of the day they don't run, you have to then manually change them so that you reduce the number of processes, or you do something different, or you change the task type. So it's a little bit more of a manual administration with that. So the 2 things we're thinking to make it a little bit more dynamic. One is, what if we gave you ability to say that I want my backgrounder node to have 70% of, up to 70% of capacity to run Tableau flows. And the second priority is 30% of the time run my extract refreshes. And the rest of the time, if there are no extracts running, there are no flows running, then just run all my system jobs, right? So that kind of a dynamic where you set the priorities you care about for individual nodes, and then that Tableau in the background does the right thing based on your prioritization. So that's one thing we're thinking in terms of capacity management. Does that resonate with you guys? Is that something that you feel is a better approach?
How would you stop APIs? How would you stop APIs command line from executing extracts?
How do you stop?
Well, you can do everything you want with permissions internally on schedules or wherever you go.
Yeah.
How do you stop it?
So the way that would work is that in the back end, for example, we would have queues which would be based on certain types of tasks. So it doesn't matter if they're REST APIs or server UI or tab command, for example, they would all go into the same queue. And then you could have additional things you could do in terms of job characteristics. For example, you could say that my short-running jobs, anything that runs less than 2 minutes, Tableau prioritizes higher, right? So even within that, you can have multiple things. So that brings me to the second use case, which is we're thinking of giving you ability to, so we talked about job type, being able to dedicate backgrounders by job type, by extract refreshers or subscriptions or flows. But what if we can give you ability where you can say that if any job type on my system is less than 2 minutes, prioritize that higher, right? And because, or if my user is having successful job runs, incentivize them and have them have the higher priority over someone whose jobs fail more often, for example.
Yeah, it's like reserve some channels for your faster running jobs and have them have a quick turnaround. And the majority of the thing can still do the, majority of the capacity can still do the heavy lifting.
Yeah. So again, we have 3 areas we talked about: governance policy, priorities based on permissions based on prioritization, and then job capacity management. Which of these things would you say was higher priority? I'm sorry? Governance? Okay. Everybody agrees with that? All right, excellent. All right, that's kind of what we had to cover today. Here, just a couple of other things. Oh, come and talk to us, because I think because we are kind of out of time here. And here's just a couple of sessions that are related. So one is our lab activity, but there's one more, which is a performance tuning, which is also going to talk about backgrounder and how you can tune it so that you get better performance from your backgrounder. So check that out if you're interested.
Yeah.
What were those acronyms that you showed before the custom?
Yeah.
You said those were on the community?
Yeah, so there's a link that is to you. The deck should be available to you. I'm just going to go back one more. So there's a link right there. So it's in the community site, and if you can give me information, I can send it to you directly. Okay. But yeah, but they're on our site, on our community, and you can definitely use them.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you click on it, it'll just go there, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, right now? Okay, yeah, I can do that.
Yeah, in the meantime, please do give us survey feedbacks on our talk. This is the first time we, from this team, talk about backgrounders. Let us know what are the things you would like to hear more or less in the future talks, or would you like future talks? Like, yeah, definitely give us feedbacks.
So here's it. Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.